Good evening, folks. It's Poms from Palatrax. I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend. Let's hope, everything crossed. It's a bit miserable down here, so that means the internet could be a bit dodgy. So I'll let a few people hopefully come on, and then I'll go into the thrust of this live feed, which, if all goes to plan, don't forget, sometimes it doesn't. Frequently it doesn't, technophobe Pom, but we'll be having the highly rated Julian Chidgey coming on board as a guest tonight. So good evening, Rod, hope you're well. So Julian's, he runs Inspired Angling Services, top, and I will be a bit gushing, but he's a very good guide if you're looking for fish guide. He's a Drenham Cup winner. He's all kinds of things, but he's hopefully going to be joining us very shortly. So, Richard, how you doing? Ben, how you doing? I was just looking. Somebody sent me a link to Capital Carp Community. There's a debate going on there about grips, so feel free to join in. Fortunately, most of them are very nice comments. So the grip story is definitely getting out there. Charlie, how you doing, mate? But some people are strange, aren't they? They get behind the keyboard and start tapping away the most outrageous rubbish. But is that not the internet, I suppose? It's not. I'm not fazed because, as I say, 90% are fantastic, as they should be. James, how you doing? Paul, good evening. Right, so what I'm going to do, just before I bring Julian on, is tonight's live feed prize. Darren, good evening. Is because we're talking a bit of predatory fish tonight, pike and perch and stuff like that. So there's the eagle waves and the monster cat. And evening, Matthew, evening, Ian, Trevor, Darren, good evening. And there's some of the newer grips hooks, which are the smaller size eagle waves. And courtesy of Keith, a couple of stickers just to stick somewhere. I've got them all over my computer now. Paul, good evening. So what I'm going to do now is let's everything crossed, and we'll see if there you go. Look, Keith's just popped up. Evening, Keith. That's the latest edition of Catch More Fish, our online magazine, which is Keith is the editor of. If you don't see that, it's a lot of passion, a lot of thoughts goes into it. So please have a look at that. Neil, Stephen, right, here we go. And I've got to accept, add. Simon, how you doing? Jeff, good to see you here. It says adding, so that's a start, I suppose. But I've been stressing about this all day. Sean, how you doing, sir? All good? Oh, something's happening.
It works.
Ah, I can't see you though. I cannot see you.
Can you hear me? That's the most important bit. I
can hear you, but cool. I also see you on my other screen here because I put that as well.
Okay, well, yeah. As long as everyone else can hear me and see me, we should all be good. Evening, everyone.
Good evening, Julian. So I was just going through Julian, but I thought what would be a good way to kick things off. Hi, Rob. I will keep on butting in, as you know, Julian. Dave Clifford, good to see you, mate. But I'll let Julian, I've probably given him a disservice by my introduction a short while ago. Andre, no snow in Slovakia, good to see you here, mate. So Julian, do you want to just say hello and tell people who you are?
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love to. Firstly, thanks for joining everyone this evening. My name is Julian Chidgey. I am a professional guide, angling consultant. I also help run a fishery as well. Lifelong angler, multi-species angler, but if there was only one species that I could fish for the rest of my days, and I had to make that decision, it would probably be pike. So I'm really always enthused to talk about pike fishing. I'm really looking forward to the show with you tonight.
Fantastic. And like Julian says, he catches lots of fish, but he's certainly caught some clonking pike and a lot of other different species. So the first question I've got for you, and I've got some Stephen, good evening. I've got some questions coming in. Tinny's just printing off the computer at the moment. But just because I say we all love fishing, we love our captures and our memories. What's the greatest memory you've had from a pike point of view?
I'm going to go one extreme to the other if I can. So one that always sticks with me was the first time I ever saw one. And I remember it to this day. And it was quite some years ago now, obviously. But I remember when I used to walk to primary school. I used to cross a canal on the way there each morning, and the few of us that were interested in angling, every morning we'd run down onto the towpath if the water was clear and look for fish, and we'd try and identify, yep, that's a roach or a rudd, the stripy one's a perch. And one day we saw this fish there, and it sat perfectly still in the margin, and we hadn't seen one before. Yeah, it shot across the canal out of sight quicker than anything we'd ever seen move before. We went to school, we looked up what this fish was, and it was a pike. And the way this thing sat perfectly still, the way it sat in its environment so well camouflaged, and then just, the speed it moved at just really caught my attention. And I immediately wanted to catch them. And that desire has never stopped since. That one really sticks with me. Going all the way to probably the other end of things, I've done lots of chasing big pike on lots of different waters, but one water that really sticks with me would be the Baltic Sea, because it was just so inspirational. I fished off the German coast, and genuinely you're catching herring, garfish, bream, perch, and pike all in the same water. And for someone like me that's inspired by big waters, by active styles of fishing, being out there and at times not being able to see land in any given direction, and catching these great big pike. They're the same species, Esox lucius, the same species we catch here, but in this, in this brackish environment, was really, really inspiring. So those are probably two memories, right at kind of two different ends of my fishing experience, that always really stay in my mind.
Fantastic. And I think we all have those childhood memories. I can remember at Repton Pools catching my first pike on a split cane sea rod. So that's how long ago it was. But, yeah, showing me age. Rich Shaw, good evening. We've got a couple of questions come up here. From Ian Rooker, what is the safest way of unhooking pike? And that is on my list, because I think you'll back me up that these fish are very, very, they might look angry, but they're very, very delicate.
They really are, absolutely.
And I would always suggest personally, if you go pike fishing for the first time, make sure you go with somebody who's been doing it for a while, so they can show you what. But what's your best tip for safest unhooking pike?
Brilliant. Well, you're doing the right things by asking the questions before you get there. Too many people just go out, catch one of these fish, and then don't know what to do. There's never been a better time to learn in that respect, because in the past, information was quite hard to come by, whereas nowadays, obviously, with the internet, there's lots of great information. You can go on to, whether you go onto YouTube and see kind of step-by-steps with people showing how to handle them. Some of the tackle companies put out some great information now on handling pike, and of course the Pike Anglers Club of Great Britain as well, which have regional clubs all across the UK. I'd say attend one of their meetings, try and get out with an experienced pike angler. And there's a few things with regards to tackle, not tips and things like that you've really got to get right beforehand. So really making sure, obviously, that you've got strong tackle. I love light tackle fishing for any species. I love sporting styles of fishing. For pike fishing, for me, that goes out the window a little bit, because with obviously larger hooks, treble hooks, and a very delicate fish, it's important that we use really, really strong tackle, that we've got unhooking gear, so things like, the long handle pliers, hook cutters if we ever need them, so that we can always get the hook out. Latex landing nets are another great innovation, because the hooks don't tangle in the net, and you can get yourself in a real mess with multiple hooks, as feature on many pike rigs, without a latex mesh, and a good size unhooking mat, obviously, to lay them down on. But with regards to information, YouTube's a great source, and the Pike Anglers Club of Great Britain. I'd say look at those sources, and you'll get all of the information. Or of course, you can book someone who's an experienced pike angling guide to go out with. I don't guide for pike myself. I keep the winter for my pike fishing. That's how much I enjoy it.
You're a lucky man. So hopefully that's answered the question, Ian. But what was the next one? When pike fishing, do you use? Hang on a second. This is always specialist rigs. So that's a good question, because I think a lot of people, I know what you're saying about YouTube. YouTube's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the thing is, you'll get some really quite radical people saying, I fish for pike, and they might have caught a tiny pike at one stage, and they give off.
Of course, yeah.
So you want to be using accredited pike anglers.
Absolutely.
People
there's some good. good sources on there, Carl and Alex's channel, stuff like that, where there's plenty of really good content on there. Like you say, they make sure, like anything, using kind of established sources for that information. But it's great because you can literally go through things step by step with regards to things like handling and so on. Even if you had a fish, there and you were trying to deal with it, having those sources of information is great. But as you rightly said at the top of that question there, you can't beat going out and someone showing you that for the first few times, and then moving on to fishing more independently from there.
And so rigs, what's your favourite rig?
Well, anyone that's ever fished with me or seen the content that I try and put out, I try and fish in the most simple but effective way that I can. I love float fishing. So and on most waters that you fish, the margins are the biggest feature. So a lot of my fishing, certainly early on in the day and later on in the day, I would be fishing close in. So I do a lot of float fishing. I saw before this one tonight, someone had asked in the chat as well about float fishing and what depths to fish at. Now, yes, I like presenting a dead bait on the bottom with a simple float rig, but one of the most effective methods I find when I'm float fishing as well is to fish off the bottom. So the natural thing is that most people sort of float ledger. So the float on the surface, weight and bait on the bottom. I like to suspend the bait a lot of the time. We're fishing for a fish that's got its eyes almost on the top of its head. It's not like a carp where they're here, they're up here. This is a fish that generally sits quite low in the water column and then comes up to feed. So if you've got your baits nice and high in the water, that's going to be visible to a lot of pike. And if you're off the bottom, that bait's going to move either with the flow of the river or the undertow. So you're going to be covering water and covering fish all the time. So don't just stick to the static approach, but simple float rigs, whether fished on the bottom or off the bottom, are a great starting point. It doesn't need to be complicated to catch pike.
No, I agree with that. I mean, the amount I've caught on an on-deck spinner, I'm just going to show everybody, this is my favourite little spinner. And I've caught, they're not as good quality as they used to be, but I don't know if you've ever seen those, Julian, they're not quite as old as me.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, brilliant.
And all I've done is retrofitted the grips on there.
Yes,
and simple wire trace, and the amount of fish, it's got really good strumming action, this spinner, and the amount of fish I've caught on these has just been wonderful. It's one of my favourite ways of fishing. It's so exciting. No, well, that's fantastic. So we're sorry I've missed a few people joining us, but Jeff is asking, how do you decide where to target when you arrive at new water? Assuming you can't see them and there are no fish topping, what depths or features are you looking on a large lake?
Brilliant. So one of the things that I would always do before I go to a new water for the first time, I'd use the online mapping sites. This is whether it's a still water or a river, and that will give you some clues before you even get there. For example, on a lot of clearer waters like gravel pits, very often you can see shallow and deep areas on the mapping sites. You can see where there's bays and so on. On rivers, you can see where there's bends, there's weirs, and the type of features that you might want to target. So I'd look at those before I get there, so I've got some idea of what I'm looking at. What I would always do as well, get there at first light, because that's the best time to obviously see where prey fish are topping, and that's going to give you lots of clues as to where to start. So I'd follow those clues. If there's anything like pinch points, narrow areas where fish are going to be passing through, I'd be looking for those type of features as well.
Yeah, and also think about where the small fish maybe.
Absolutely. Like I say, getting there at first light, so often there'll be fish dimpling on the surface, those clues that you need. If the prey fish are there, predators won't be far away.
And also, if you do see them strike, move on to them. Never expect them to come to you. Always move on to them.
Absolutely, definitely.
One of the things I do, Julian, so I'll just throw it out here, I don't know if you do it yourself, but especially using the Daphne and maggot crush, so it's like the method mixed ground bait we do. I ram it full of gamma shrimp so it'll explode. And I tend to, this is particularly when I go, more so when I go spinning. It sounds like I go a lot. I've hardly done any in the recent years. But I'll put out ground bait, try and get the silvers going with the hope that the predators will turn up, because that's where the silvers are. Is that something you do at all?
Yeah, I've kind of got two different approaches to that. So I've got what you might term pre-baiting, and then I've got more sort of proactive baiting, as I term it. So I'll deal with kind of the proactive baiting first. So if I'm planning on staying in a swim for any length of time, absolutely, I'll use sort of traditional ground bait along with some cut up fish. and I'll keep balling that in over the top of where I'm fishing, looking to try and get as much attraction into the swim as I can, both in terms of obviously feeding silverfish, which will then obviously draw the pike in through the vibration, the smell that they're putting out, and then obviously putting up chopped up fish as well, which again, that smell will go on the undertow, or obviously on the flow of the river, and again drawing the pike in. So really work the swim the same as you would anything else. Even when you're doing sort of static dead baiting, it doesn't need to be static in terms of you don't need to be sat on your chair all day. There's lots of things that you can be doing to give yourself a better chance, and that type of approach is really good. Pre-baiting is slightly different, but it makes up a huge part of my pike fishing, and it's an area that people don't talk about that much. So if I'm fishing somewhere, if I'm targeting the same water on a regular basis, I have found you can very, very easily manipulate the behavior of the pike and get them into an area through regularly putting in chopped up or whole fish. And that's something that I do a lot of, and I find if you do it over a length of time, the bigger and bigger pike turn up, they sort of hold court over that area, the smaller pike drift away, and very often I found that a real fast track to catching the biggest pike or the bigger pike in the water very, very quickly. Sometimes the first bite after pre-baiting for a little while is the biggest one in there. I've had that on quite a few occasions. So something that you think about maybe more for tench or carp and other species, but done right for pike, it's really, really effective.
And what's your favourite dead bait? Mine has to be the oily mackerel, but no doubt we've all got different opinions on that one. But
it's a weird one, isn't it? Because it's one of those where everyone has their favourite, and I've certainly been on waters that isn't it weird? Because most of the time we use these dead baits that are basically foreign objects to a pike, unless we're using a roach or whatever, or a trout in a trout lake. Most of the baits we use are foreign to them. Yet you do at times see preferences where you can only get a run on one particular type of bait for whatever reason, which is absolutely bizarre when you're using something that they wouldn't normally come across. But I guess if I had to choose one, it would probably be one of the more less oily baits. It would probably be a smelt.
Right.
And I think for me, the reasoning behind that is I find when the feeding scale for pike is high, they'll pick up almost anything. On those days, it probably doesn't matter what you pick up and use. But I have found that on those harder days, which I reckon are probably 80-90% of fishing days, when if you've ever seen them coming up to dead baits on camera, again, there's lots of stuff online about this. I've done it putting out the water wolf cameras at the top of the wire trace and seeing how pike react. They do a hell of a lot of coming in, inspecting the dead baits and swimming away. And you see on those days when the feeding scale is high, they pick up everything they come across. However, on the rest of those days, they can be a lot more inquisitive, but not actively feeding. And on those days, I find a lower oil bait, particularly if you just balance it, so it just kind of not popped up lately, just so it just sits naturally on its tail. So when they come across and they're moving their gills, and obviously that expels water, which just moves the bait a little bit, or they're just fanning their fins, sniffing the bait, something that will sit and on its tail, a lighter bait like a smelt, which is easier to balance than say a half a mackerel, I found converts more of those inquisitive inspections of the bait into actual bites. So if I had to choose one, for me it would be a smelt, and a balanced smelt for that reason.
And these are the inconsistencies of angling. We've all got our different opinions.
They are, yeah, absolutely.
As long as we're enjoying it and as long as you're catching. Now, I've got loads of comments. So Robert's asking me, I only started fishing for pike last year, was lucky enough to have some help from one of my club bailiffs. And my first ever pike was 15 pound 9 ounces. That's a nice fish.
Yeah.
What Michael's saying, what are your thoughts on wearing gloves for unhooking? You can experience cuts with the gagless technique, especially hang on a second, especially in the colder temperatures. You don't always release, you have realized you've cut yourself. So basically asking gloves or not.
I don't tend to use a glove, but I also don't believe that the use of like a Kevlar filleting glove, which is basically what is repurposed into the angling industry for pike handling, it's not going to do the fish any harm, particularly for people that have to be aware of cutting themselves, if they're on blood thinners, anything else like that, or any other medical reasons, for example. Then I don't believe that it does any harm, or if you just don't want to get those little cuts. But they are just like little superficial nicks generally if you're handling the pike correctly. But yeah, some people may well choose to use a glove, and it's totally up to them.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. Totally agree. Right, what's Anthony asking us here? So are we just saying hello to you, Anthony? Spinning for pike is possibly my favourite way to fish, and that's Jason. I'm with you there, Jason. Jeff's saying thank you. Paul Perch, good evening. Apologies if I've missed. Here's an old one. Steve Thompson used to use MEP spinners.
Oh yeah.
Are they still about? Are they still about, MEPs? I should imagine
they are. Do you know what? It was lovely when he showed the on-deck spinners earlier. It took me right back to being a kid, and on the drains and rivers of the Somerset Levels where I grew up. Me and another lad, every weekend in the winter, we used to have a competition where he always favoured an on-decks and I always favoured the MEPs. In hindsight, the on-decks that you showed earlier was the perfect lure for those waters because it was shallow, it was weedy, and of course the on-decks has that fine wire body that actually holds up in the water with that big French blade, whereas the MEPs obviously tends to have a heavier design and probably wasn't as suitable. But yeah, that took me back when he showed me that on-decks. But yeah, MEPs still catch lots of fish, and they've caught some huge pike over the years, the MEP spinner. On places like Langdegfed, there's been huge pike on them, and in more recent years, it's actually the large size 5 Aglia long has actually been one of the favoured lures on Chew Valley for big pike as well, even though it's quite small compared to a lot of the modern lures that are used nowadays.
Yeah, I see some of them. I must admit, I don't keep in regular touch like you will do, because you're sponsored by Witchwood and do all of their pike gear as well.
I've got a few of my favourites here as well for comparison.
Right, let's go through these in a second. We'll go through that next, but I'll just go through Paul Perch. This shows you again. He's caught a few pike in his time. Sardines are best, so there you go.
Lots of sardine.
Belt is my favourite. Steve Thompson. Do you believe, we'll come back to that one, but do you believe moon phases affect pike? Oh, there's the
good old moon phase question. I think there are waters that are affected by moon phases. I think for average anglers who've got maybe one day a week to go out fishing, don't get too hung up on it, because you'll just forever be waiting for the right conditions, and it's another reason not to go. So by all means monitor it, see if it affects your results. I did something a little while ago where actually, if you ask me how many carp or other species, numbers of big fish of other species I've caught, I probably haven't written them all down, but I've got a spreadsheet of all my big pike. I'm a bit nerdy with big pike. So what I did, I've got the dates that go all the way back to 1996 when I caught my first ever 20-pounder, and I've got the dates for every single big pike, i.e. over 20 or 30 pounds that I've ever caught, and I mapped them out against the moon phases. Absolutely no correlation in terms of big pike and my own captures as far as I could see, but other experienced pike anglers say that they have found correlations. So by all means monitor it, don't get hung up on it. And as Sean's just rightly said as well, going back to the MEP spinner, 45 pounder from Langdegfed caught on that tiny little spinner. So even the small lures can do it sometimes as well.
Yeah, well, I think we're in danger, especially nowadays in carp fishing, of making assumptions. I can always remember, I wasn't invited back after this, but Carpology they used to send a ring of questions round to people who were involved in the trade, and they sent me around, and I can remember there was Terry Hearn and another couple of well-known anglers. I certainly was a well-known angler, no doubt down to advertising and things like that. They'd asked me, but and they said literally what your concerns about moon phases, and I'm just like you. I think if you believe a moon phase is going to stop you from catching fish or catching more fish, you're having to make an assumption. Does it or doesn't it? I don't think you'll ever be able to answer that question. And I'd actually put in and managed to grab off, what was it back in those days where you used to get pictures from, of a great big werewolf. I said my real concern when fishing under a full moon as a werewolf, it didn't go back well, and they didn't ask me to write for them again. There we go. That's my experiences. So Jason's asking, not something I've got any experience in, any tips on safely chinning pike?
Absolutely. I think, like I say, there's so much information out there now. It's one of those things where I think a visual interpretation through like video or whatever, or with an experienced angler, is the easiest thing. But obviously laying the fish effectively on its back on a well padded mat, sitting astride it, so just holding it in place but not gripping it, which could obviously damage the internal organs, and then just sliding your hand to the front of the gill cover, closing the hand to form a fish shape, and then just lifting it, so that the mouth drops open, obviously with the fish between your legs, so that it's contained. And then with your free hand, you're just unhooking it. Again, much easier when shown on a video or being talked through by someone on the bank. So I'd say if you're thinking about having a go for the first time, make sure that you get a good understanding, obviously, of that before you go out.
I know you're obviously pointing people towards YouTube and such. Like, have you not done stuff yourself where we could point people
I have,
to?
yeah. Obviously, I've put out that type of content when I've been linked to other brands in the past. That content's still out there. So even if you go onto those channels and pop my name in, you'll see. I've always really pushed when I've been out with different companies in the past. It's not just about products; it's about making sure that people are using these sensibly and handling the fish well. So certainly, where I've put that type of content out, look at some of the recent stuff that I've put out, obviously with Witchwood in their agitator predator brand, and you'll see that there's plenty of that type of content there as well.
And that's good. I mean, a lot of this content, I'm involved in the trade, obviously. A lot of this content is out there is to sell, sell, sell. But I firmly believe we should be helping people catch more fish safely. And so we've almost got a duty of care to do that. Right, before we go on, just another shout out for tonight's live feed draw. All you've got to do is send a yes to the Palatrax Facebook Messenger page. So where you are now, just send yes. And there's a load of grips and some stickers and bits and pieces. So if you'd like to get involved with a chance for that, we'll draw it in about a quarter of an hour. So there's some of the predator hooks in there as well. So I will ask you one thing, because there's a few more questions here. So bear with me, folks. You've seen this hook, Julian, the latest basically hook I've designed. Have you used this at all for single hooks on pike, or is it yet to be tried?
I haven't used it for pike. I've tried lots of combinations of single hooks, both traditional J hooks and circle hooks for pike fishing. I'm going to be really honest, I've tried all variations of it, whether it's hooking the bait directly onto the hook, hair rig variations and so on. So far, I've not come up with anything with a good enough conversion. I think that for most predatory species, single hooks work really well, but I do think that we need to accept that the mouth construction of a pike is different to everything else bar zander that we fish for in freshwater in this country. So whilst, for example, Wells catfish, J hooks and circle hooks, depending on the rigs, work really, really well, I find in most situations treble hooks are better for pike. I think sometimes the treble hooks don't need to be as big as people might have used in the past, and you don't always need to be as many. But I find, still a treble hook, and obviously grips are absolutely brilliant. I've been using the grips trebles so far this winter, and they make the handling so easy. You land the fish still, you're not losing fish when you're playing them, but half the time I'm finding when I've put the net down to sort out the scales or get the unhooking gear out, half the time the fish has unhooked itself in the net anyway. Half the time I'm not even having to handle it, and when I am, they're really, really easy to deal with as well, which is obviously exactly what we want. So have tried single hooks, haven't been good for me, but for perch situations, eel fishing, catfish, zander, and so on, they do have plenty of use. Yes.
It's interesting though, because I'm quite involved in the environmental aspects of a lot of areas of fishing. More and more people are talking to me about moving away from trebles to single hooks. So I think that's something that may well happen in the future. But Jeff is saying, how do you pick a water to target big fish? A big pike, sorry. Is the only way to watch catch reports, or is there a way to predict on a lesser known waters?
Oh, that's a really good one. And like I say, I fish for everything, and I think that out of all of the different groups of single species anglers that you come across when you're fishing for everything, pike anglers are usually the most secretive. It is so hard to get information. Generally, by the time you've heard about it, it's probably a bit too late. There are things that you can look for. Pike can get big. Pike will get big on a surplus of food, but it doesn't need to be a particular species. So for years, people would say, it's these protein-rich trout in trout waters. That's why pike gets so big. It's not that. If you look at the protein levels, for example, within a trout compared to a carp or a roach, It's not about that. It's about the food availability and food of the right size. So I would look for a water that has a surplus of food for one. Doesn't matter what species it is. So it could be a little club lake where the club have suddenly started piling in loads of small carp, for example, and created a situation where there's far more food than there normally would be in a water of that size, for example. Two, the food needs to be the right size. Pike, to get big and to get big quickly, don't just need lots of food, it needs to be of a good size. If they're easily hunting down prey items of, say, between half a pound up to £2, and then just resting up and absorbing that, they're going to get bigger a lot quicker than if they're chasing around all over the place, eating millions of little quarter-ounce things. So I'd look for waters with loads and loads of food, for one. Two, the right size food. And again, it doesn't matter what species it is. Three, things that are off the radar. So yeah, I know that it's not as always as easy as that, but waters that might not have been pike fished that heavily. I've come across quite a few waters, even in the last few years, where pike fishing, just hasn't happened, and there's just been rumours of smaller pike, and yet they've gone on to produce really, really good fish. So anywhere that doesn't have the pressure, and pressure is really bad for pike fishing. It's great. I love pike fishing, but the worst thing for pike a lot of the time is pike anglers, unfortunately. And as a species, they don't cope with pressure in the same way. A big carp can be caught dozens and dozens of times in its longer life. Pike are a shorter lived species. 15 to 18 years in most environments would be, a very, very old pike. So that when they've got to that big size, they're not going to be caught again and again and again. And very often it might just even be just 1 or 2 year classes that get through to those big sizes. And when those few large individuals have gone, sometimes there'll be nothing behind it. So if there's a water where you think, do you know what, that ticks those boxes, there's lots of food in there, they're good sized prey items, no one's really targeted it, those are the places that I'll be looking at. And one of the great things about big pike fishing is the variation in places where that can happen. It's not always the huge reservoir. There's the year before last, I caught a 29-pounder out of a 6-acre stillwater near where I live. And yet I've also caught big pike from big reservoirs from the Baltic Sea, like we mentioned earlier. There's a real variation as to where those fish can turn up. And I can certainly think of tiny little club lakes where they've put lots and lots of small fish in there, small carp and things like that. And the pike have suddenly had a proliferation of food, and waters of an acre or even less producing 30-pounders. So there's probably not a puzzle with all of the pieces to find a pike water, because you'll very rarely find 2 big pike waters that look the same. But if you look for those things, you won't go too far wrong.
I think if you kind of almost want to guarantee it, it has to be the likes of Chew and some of these waters that frequently put out fish over £20, but they're not the easiest waters to get onto, are they?
I think, they can be difficult to get onto. A lot of places now realise the value of the fishing, so there's now a price point for premium pike fishing, which probably sits close to premium salmon fishing in a lot of cases. And I'm not just talking about the reservoirs. I can think of some of the southern chalk streams, river stretches, where suddenly they've realised, hang on, people will pay good money for this. So it can be quite a premium thing. But obviously the reservoirs are a great place to target. I do quite a lot of reservoir fishing, and it's exciting. And I know for people that haven't done that style of fishing before, particularly from a boat, it can seem like, big waters, boat fishing, things like that. But they're all great things to learn. And I know I fished Chew since it opened in 2001. And even now, every time the float goes under, or I get a hit on the lure, or the drop-off indicator goes on the bank, you feel your heart in your chest when that happens, because it might just be another one, 3-4 pound, or it can be an absolute monster. So absolutely, there's those waters. They only last for any length of time because the pike fishing on them is so controlled. What you tend to find on waters that suddenly become good pike waters is they get fished out quite quickly. So quite a few of the waters that I've fished haven't necessarily allowed pike fishing, or they've been like a carp syndicate, and I've had to approach and say, look, I'm happy to buy a carp syndicate ticket or whatever to fish purely for the pike. Very often big pike, it's that lack of pressure that allows them to get there. So if there is somewhere and you think that could be worth a go, I'd always say, check it out. Don't just, if somewhere's got a reputation for big pike and it's open access, it's probably too late. But there's also a lot more to it than just big pike as well. Pike fishing in general is great, and it's not just about hunting monsters. I do that fishing, but I still love going out on the drains and rivers around where I fish, catching smaller ones as well.
And they are absolute stunning looking fish. Like you say, I mean, it's like I'm going to go on to a question actually I've got from Simon, the owner of Top Cats out in Thailand. But fishing over in Thailand, you've got all these different mouths, but you've got fish like the alligator gar and the arapaima, proper predatory fish, and they kind of sit like that. They've got a magnificent colouring and, like you say, fantastic camouflage. So Simon from Top Cats, can you ask Julian a question from moi? I just had a random pike post on my feed where the guy said he caught on popped up sand eel. How do you pop up a fish? Sometimes I may try here with our dead bait fishing, and I'm over there week after next, so with Keith, so we can take this information out and try it. So how should we do it?
Brilliant. So the most important thing when you're adding buoyancy into a dead bait is doing it in a way where whatever you're attaching stays fixed to the line afterwards. So there's methods like the plungers with a foam where you put the foam inside the bait. The problem is, when you wind down and strike and the bait comes free, you're putting out foam or whatever into the environment, which is obviously a pretty poor thing to do. So what I always do, whether I'm using the dead bait balsa sticks or pop-up balls, I always attach them obviously with a piece of trace wire, loop them over my own trace, and then just pull them using a long baiting needle through the bait, and then just put the swivel of the wire trace through the loop, so the wire's going through the bait itself and holding that piece of buoyancy to the line as well. So it's popping the bait up, but then obviously the bait can come free, but the buoyancy remains attached to the line. So yeah, pop up balls. So if you're going out to see the guys at Top Cats, obviously it might be worth taking a few of those bits and bobs because they're in all the tackle shops here for pike fishing. But pop up balls, foam as long as it's tied to the rigs, and obviously the balsa sticks as well. But I think taking the weight out of a dead bait, like I said earlier, trust me, on those difficult days, it is a real edge. Just getting it just to sit up so that, and it doesn't matter if it's a red-tailed catfish, a pike, or any other predator, so that when it comes up to it, you just get that little bit of movement from the dead bait. And on those tough days, it's often enough to trigger a bite that you otherwise might not have got. Well,
I'm seeing you next week, so bring some bits with you and show me how.
I'll pop those down on Friday when I see you.
Every day's a school day. I missed a few questions here. I do apologise, folks, but they've come through thick and fast, and I can't keep up with them. I'm still trying to get. What's this one here? Sean Tuckfield. I've got my own opinions on titanium traces. I've now stopped using them due to their stiffness and the way the bait reacts underwater. Also, if you place wire in your mouth, you get that metallic taste, I think. Do you think pike are in tune with this metallic taste? I've read some interesting articles that sharks can. I feel coated wire, something supple like orphanic. I don't know that.
Orphanic wire, yeah.
Orphanic, well, there we go. You know what I'm there. Interested in your thoughts on that one.
So there's a real trend at the moment to use multi-strand titanium traces. They're favoured simply for one reason, and that's the durability. So if you think about the traditional 7-strand wires that we used in pike fishing, you took it out the packet, it looks lovely. You catch a pike on it, you unhook the pike, and you've got this raveled, kinked, tangled mess that's no good for anything. And worse still, very often if it's kinked, it will lose its strength as well. And we know if we leave those hooks, in a pike, if we snapped off, for example, very often that'd be fatal for the fish. So we've got to avoid that. And there was a real movement towards these titanium traces. People saying I've had single traces on my rods that have lasted 100 fish, 3 seasons. So from a durability point of view, absolutely brilliant. The problem is they're stiff. So the thing that I was talking about, that on the 8 or 9 days out of 10, when the feeding scale is very low, they provide no movement in the bait. It's like having a piece of fencing wire tied to your dead bait, effectively. So doing things like balancing the baits out, providing any subtlety in that presentation, providing a presentation that can move slightly as the pike comes up to, you lose all of that with titanium. And for me, it's a real convenience product that people are favouring at the moment. My personal preference, and they are slightly more expensive wires as the 49 strand. So they look, to all intents and purposes, like the traditional 7-strand wires that we're certainly used to. However, they've got a lot more movement in them. If you had your eyes closed, it would feel more like a carp braid than a wire, and they allow the bait to move a lot more naturally, which, whatever you're fishing for, that can only be an edge. So that's my preference. With regards that taste, I think it's not going to do any harm to use a nylon coated one. It gives a little bit more durability to the product, and particularly with these finer wires in a very fine nylon coating, no problem at all. Can Pike detect that? Can Pike detect the trace wire? Not too sure about that one, but I know that obviously sharks definitely can.
Yeah, I think we always need to be very careful, assuming that they're not clever, but in their own environment they know a damn sight. And until we can get a fish, stick it under a spotlight, and it talks English, we're always going to be having to make assumptions. One thing that a lot of people talk about nowadays, especially in France, I know people over in France, is using fluorocarbon leaders for pike. Sorry, is that something you've ever tried?
So going back to when I fished in the Baltic, all of the guides there, and a lot of the anglers across mainland Europe and increasingly in this country, are switching to fluorocarbon and hard mono in like 1.2 mil and above.
Right.
It's not for me. Everyone that I know who's tried it for any length of time has been bitten off at some point. Now, if you get bitten off with, for example, a relatively small single hook like you showed earlier, it may not kill that pike, but it's still not a risk worth taking. A lot of modern pike fishing, if you're casting big lures like this jerkbait that's going to have several large hooks on it, if you snap off on that and it's got that in its mouth, it's game over basically. So for me, any kind of risk, I want to take that out of the tackle. And as much as I like sporting fishing, and I also like anything that I perceive gives me an edge, I think using fluoro over wire, if it is giving you any kind of edge, it's very much at the risk of the fish's safety as a result. So for me, it's an absolute no-no.
So yeah, and I agree with you. It should never be about catching at all costs, without a shadow of a doubt. And going on to this is something, and you may well be totally different. I know you're far more skilled at pike fishing than I am, but deep hooked fish. You get so many people, and hence why you always must have forceps when you're pike fishing. But you know, what I have done over years is watch the likes of underfishing. So basically, people who are doing unedited underwater footage. And there's always been this thing from when I was a kid that, you know, a pike will come in, it will take the bait on the side, and it'll turn it round in its mouth, and you need to let the fish run and then before you strike it, which, you know, I actually don't agree with at all, because that, I personally believe, from my experiences, ends up with deep hook fish. I'd rather miss a bite than end up with a deep hook fish, especially when you're talking trebles. Then one of the reasons I do that as well is not because it's just my opinion. I just watch so much underwater footage where the pike will come in and just completely nail the fish. It's not about stopping it and turning it around in its mouth and things like that. So where are you with that?
I think if your hooking setup is correct, and we'll pretend this is a dead bait, because I haven't got a dead bait to hand, but if we just pretend this is a dead bait, almost whichever way a pike of any size takes that, it's going to have the middle part here in its mouth. And I always think if you've got a treble in the flank there, that's going to be well positioned, and then either a single or another treble obviously in the root of the tail there. This one here is the one that's going to do the hooking, so having it centrally in the flank like that, it's always going to be in the right place. Now if you're using dead baits of roughly this size, I think this is a 6-inch replica.
I don't know, Julian, I'm having to look across here because I'm on my other screen. But yeah, if you hold it up a bit, so yeah. Yeah,
there we go. So I always think if you've got your treble hook centrally on the bait like that, not too far down the body. Now, if that dead bait is 6 inches long, if a pike of any size picks that bait up, it's going to have that hook in its mouth. If you're missing runs using a relatively small dead bait of around 6 inches with a hook positioned in that way, that pike is so small that you're not going to want to catch it anyway. even if a 3 or 4 pounder picks it up that way, it's going to have it in its mouth. So yeah, so for me, it's about the hook positioning is really important. When to strike. Now, whichever way the pike picks that up, it's going to have that hook in its mouth from the moment it picks the bait up. So if you've got a well-positioned hook, as soon as you get an indication, whether that's that first bob of the float, whether it's the drop-off indicator going, there's no reason to be waiting. For me, when you get that indication, it's a case of winding down till you feel the weight of the fish and lifting into it. If you're missing runs with 5-6 inch dead baits with a centrally positioned treble, they're very, very small fish that it's not going to make or break your day whether you land them or not. Any pike of any size that's picked the bait up is going to get hooked.
Yeah. Good points. I think, again, those are the kind of things that frustrate me in angling, where there's not kind of discussions and conclusions made on the evidence. People are saying, well, because I've heard it, you just let the pike run. It's the same with perch fishing. You let I used to fish with a very well-known angler, and my catch rate on perch was far higher than him, and I was striking as soon as I got indication. And there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and grey areas, but what have we got here? There must be a good one here, because I just seen it from Galen, and he lives over in Canada, so they got some musky fishing over there. If you want to look into trying through again, take a look at one guys are using for musky fishing in North America. Wire for musky has been phased out. However, it is mostly large lure fishing with very heavy fluorocarbon. So there you go. That's from Canada, and again, I suppose shows you how. Do I call it dysfunctional? I don't know, but how many different opinions there, and it's always a strange one for me, because it's the same with rigs and carp fishing. There's so many different opinions. How can we ever get consistency? And so we're all fishing all these different ways. But
I think it's a little bit different with big lures as well, because the material is less likely to be coming into contact with the teeth than a lot of the bait fishing techniques that we use here, where we're using a smaller bait and encouraging the fish to pick the whole bait up. Whereas, obviously, if we look at large lures, I've got a Murus mouse here, which is one of my personal favourites at the moment. Realistically, the pike comes up and takes that. There's not that much chance, unless it hits it head on, of it coming into contact with the trace material. But
what on earth's that thing? What is it?
It's the modern equivalent of your on-decks pom. Here we go. Murus mouse. Have you never seen one of these?
No.
Shall I talk you through it? It's a brilliant lure.
Yeah, go. Look, we're here to learn. Unfortunately, folks, I'm looking that way so I can see Julian, because I can't see him on this screen. So I'm not ignoring you.
Okay.
So go.
So Murus mouse is probably one of the best lures that I've ever used. It was developed by an Italian guide called Maurizio Carini, who was an Italian guide working in Ireland about 15 years ago, and probably been made famous by a French guide called Pierre Mongerat in more recent years. It is absolutely brilliant. It's got a cork. That head there is cork, which is quite buoyant. It's got bucktail tied to it. And then a soft...
Sorry, it's just me, but it's dropping out the screen.
Okay. Let me hold it back a little bit. And then it's got a soft trailing tail. They sink very slowly, so you can fish them more like a fly than a lure.
Okay.
And it doesn't have a huge amount of action in the water. It just swims and pulsates, but absolutely deadly.
And what's that supposed to replicate?
Absolutely no idea, but the pike like them.
That's the main thing, isn't it? That's the main thing. But there is but just going back to your Jason saying fantastic lures as well there. But going back to the size of bait, I think that's something that we're, especially in regards to dead baits. Like you say, with lures, there's all different manner of sizes and shapes and patterns and weird and wonderful. But let's just say your favourite bait is a smelt. What size smelt are you looking at, and how do you, I've always cut the mackerel. Like when I use mackerel, I always cut it open to get out that leakage. So how would you mount it as well?
Normally with a hook in the root of the tail and one just down the flank, size 6-7 inches. Again, big baits, you'll get bites on them, but you miss a lot as well. And then if you do spread the hooks out with big baits, you do run the risk of deep hooking. So I prefer 6 inches instant strike.
And what's your favourite size of hook to use or treble to use?
Yeah, usually a 6.
Okay, okay, cool. So I have to ask the question. What's the biggest pike you've ever caught? I know it's not all about big fish, don't get me wrong. What's the biggest pike you've ever caught?
My PB's 34.14. I've had 12 over 30 and 132 over 20 so far.
You've had a few then. You've had
Yeah.
a few. And where's the biggest one come from? Is that a chew fish?
It is, yes, yeah. Yeah, I've had,
Yeah.
I think, eight 30s from Chew.
Blimey, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's, and do you tend to fish on the boats there, or you're fishing off the shore?
I like the boat fishing. I like the movement it gives you, the opportunity to move through the day. Definitely.
Yeah. What have I got here? Simon also is saying, I'm new to using floats when fishing for pike. I mainly fish on lakes from the bank. How do you get your depth right with the float? I've been using them today and I've struggled a bit.
Ah, okay. So make sure that you've got a decent weight on the end. Cast it out with a stop knot and just keep adjusting it until you find the depth that you want to fish. But like I say, don't get too hung up on just fishing on the bottom. Try the suspended baits as well.
Because you can get those like sails, can't you? Where you can
Yeah,
actually
like a drifter float. Yeah,
drifter
float's great if the wind's going the right way.
Yes, yes, that's it. You
You
need to
can
make sure.
reverse, without getting too technical, though, you can reverse drift as well. For those, and I'll say it quietly because some people like them, some people loathe them. If you've got the wind in your face, you can use a bait boat, drifter float out, drop it, let it drift back towards you. So that works as well. But yeah, drifter floats, a great way of covering water. But for fishing closer in, just a normal pike float with the fish with the bait fished off the bottom can be really deadly.
And so that lure that you just showed us just a minute ago, I've already forgotten the name of it. Is that
US
your
mouse.
favourite lure?
For shallow water at the moment, it's my absolute favourite. I think if I had to choose one for all different depths of water to take anywhere, well, I'd hate to do that. But if I was limited to one, do you know what? I think it'd be the Western Shad Seas at the moment. So that's the 19 centimetre version. These things have got an absolutely lovely belly roll to them, particularly if you use these are non-toxic tungsten heads that I use on those, not the traditional lead ones. Rigged in that way, they've got a lovely belly roll, and if you use quite a light weight on the head, you get a really exaggerated movement. They're absolutely deadly.
Right, right. And is that meant to replicate a trout?
I'd say that colour's sort of rudd-like, isn't it?
Right. Okay. Okay. And which one? So you can just give the name again of that for folks.
Yes, that's Western. I think I mentioned them when I saw you last week. That's a Western
Right.
Shad Tees.
Oh, Western, yeah, because we were talking about Western.
We're talking about Western, might be the other day.
Range of stuff, haven't they?
They've got some really good lures. I've caught a lot of really good pike on these. That's the 19 centimetre there. They do them up to 27, and they do them right down to about 4 centimetres as well. But for bigger pike, that's the type of size that I find myself using quite a lot. Sort of 6-7 inch lures are a good sort of middle ground. One thing I would say about lures: don't get too hung up on lures that just go in a straight line, particularly when pike are really active. Lures that zigzag with a different action, like jerk baits, like this one here, absolutely deadly. This is one that I really rate. This is a Strike Pro Guppy. So you'll notice it hasn't got, although it looks like what we used to call a plug. It doesn't have a vein. It's a slow sinking bait, and when you move the rod downwards, the action is that it glides from side to side through the water like that. And in this case, this one's got a tail that'll move at the same time. So it doesn't have that tight swim like an old Rapala or something like that would. You've got this wide, erratic gliding action. And at times, when fish won't come up and hit a straight retrieve lure, that really erratic retrieve can be really, really deadly. So, jerk baits, and they come in all shapes and sizes. I'm probably showing some bigger lures here as much as anything because it's easier on camera as well. But jerk baits are very, very effective, so well worth checking out.
But they're a work of art as well, aren't they? Now they
absolutely,
because I get the trade magazines, and frequently you see companies, Japanese. Oh, sorry, hang on a second. All right. Just quickly, the last shout out, Denise shouts, she's about to draw the competition. All you've got to do is send yes to the Facebook page here on the main Palatrax Facebook. Just send yes, and you're in with a shout, and that'll be drawn very, very quickly, very soon, even so. Yeah, and I look through the pages of these trade magazines, and I go to. I've just come back from a show in Brussels, and there's thousands of different patterns. It's just amazing how many. But that what you've shown us there is, in your opinion, the most efficient, yeah?
I think, yeah, if you literally at the moment said I've got to go out and I'm allowed to, I'd take a simple, they're quite traditional lures now, I guess, soft plastic shad, but I would really want the Murus mouse with me at the moment because I've taken it to lots of different waters. I've caught lots of pike on them, and they're just different because they're big, but they're almost weightless. If you look what that's actually made of, cork, plastic and bucktail, you end up with something that's quite neutrally buoyant, so you can fish it so slowly, which you could never do with a heavy sinking lure. You can fish it, although it's big, almost like a fly, and it gives a very different action, a lot slower action, and they seem to work very, very well. A bit pricey these, but very, very good. Going back to what you were saying about the amount of lures that are out there, it's really easy to spend a fortune on lures, end up with boxes and boxes of stuff, which is fine if you want to collect them. But I would just look into, proven lures, what works for pike in this country. Like I say, those simple shads, the Murus mouse is brilliant. Simple soft plastic swim baits like replicants, all absolutely deadly. But have a look at what people are actually catching on, because otherwise you can end up with boxes of stuff, which totally defeats the object of lure fishing, of being able to move around. You're better off with a couple little Tupperware boxes of stuff and not getting lumbered down and spending a fortune on lots of the things that are out there.
But I think that's the trades to blame, that, isn't it? It's always reinventing the wheel for the next best thing.
Yeah.
And it's like when I go fishing, fly fishing, I don't take millions of different flies with me. I just take the proven, because you end up wasting time, so much time. You put the effort into it, and it doesn't ever guarantee results. Far from it. I don't know if I've got it here. I did have it. I actually. Oh, I don't know where it's gone. I actually bought. It was. I watched the Ginger Fisherman, to be quite honest, a while ago.
Yeah.
And he was catching fish, pike after pike, using. It was like a mouse that swam across the top. I can't remember. I got one. I thought it was here. Have you tried these kind of things?
Yeah. So one of my favourite surface lures is a Savage Gear duck. I don't know if you've seen the suicide duck. This top
Yes,
looks like a duckling, and it's got the little fins on the back. Absolutely brilliant. Pike will come up from deep water to hit them, but particularly, like I say, where I live in Somerset, we've got lots of shallow drains and rivers. For bringing over the top of the weed, absolutely brilliant. Great fun to fish, whether they're frog imitations, duck imitations, whatever they might be. But yeah, brilliant fun when the fish come up and engulf them. I love visual fishing. I love surface fishing or stalking for carp, fly fishing, anything where you see fish take the bait and you can make those changes. I love that visual stuff. So for me, top water fishing like that is absolutely brilliant. And although lots of people say that's a summer method, personally, my view is once the water temperature gets up past sort of 17, 18, I stop my pike fishing. I know lots of people do choose to pike fish all year round now. My belief is that it doesn't do them any good. So I kind of tend to, once we get well into the spring and the water temperatures start to pick up, I would stop my pike fishing, and I wouldn't start. I haven't pike fished much this autumn simply because it's been so mild. Hence the fact I've been sniffing about down your place instead, fishing for other things. Normally this time of year I'd be I'd be out every week. But yeah, while it's still been so mild, I've just held off a little bit. But generally, I think as a guide, sort of 17, 18 degrees water temperature is about the most that I'll fish for them in. Because after that, they are quite susceptible, however careful you are.
Now, one thing, I fished a lake down in Devon many years ago, and the owners said you won't catch carp on the surface with a cork ball, and I quickly proved them wrong on that one. And they also said to me you won't catch pike after dark again. I quite merrily caught quite a few pike after dark. But what's your thoughts on that?
I absolutely love it, especially on clear waters. So I think some of the gravel pits that I fished, I found they come right in. You know, they'll come right into the margins. Yeah, after dark. So some of the clear gravel pits I fished have been very good after dark. Clear rivers as well. The only thing is, obviously, it's not like carp fishing. You can't be, curled up in your sleeping bag with a bivvy door done up with what are, self-hooking rigs in most carp fishing situations. You've got to be able to respond quickly. So for me, whilst I will fish into dark, if I'm staying right the way through the night, when I get to that point where I want to get my head down for a few hours, I tend to wind the rods in instead of fish right through, because I don't believe that you can respond quick enough. With a sleeping bag, bivvy, everything else when you're dead baiting for pike. But certainly fishing into dark and then starting a couple hours before first light in the morning, I've caught a lot of good fish. Doing it that way.
And what's your favourite time to catch pike? Is there a witching hour for you?
This is where you get those differences between waters. I fished a big reservoir in North Wales quite heavily a few years ago, and it was really kind to me. I had some really big fish off there, including 3 over 30. That was a real afternoon water for me. You'd sit in a swim all day and nothing would happen. And my nature, because of the way that I tend to fish, is I want to be hunting all the time and moving. But I quickly found that before about 2 in the afternoon generally was a waste of time. Between 2 and 5, that was when they really switched on. So on there, it was like that. Whereas I can think of lots of other waters I was fishing the southern chalk streams a lot last winter, gin clear. First hour was everything. Sometimes I'd drive down for 2 hours just to fish for the first hour and spend 2 hours driving back again. But you'd had your days fishing in that
Yeah.
witching hour, which in that instance was literally as it got light. So it does depend a bit water by water. But as you get to know a water and fish it a little bit, you tend to find when the best times are, and then you can just do short sessions so that you're making the most of those instead of all of those hours sat there twiddling your thumbs waiting for a bite.
Well, it's interesting again. I mean, it goes across all areas of fishing as far as I'm concerned. It's a bit like when you were down the other day. You didn't have any monsters, but you caught loads of perch, and then suddenly, bang, it just switched off. And it does that, doesn't it?
Oh, it was weird. I mean, that is a great example. You weren't available the first hour I got there. I had 22 perch, I think it was, in an hour, up to maybe just over a pound or so. I thought, oh, this is going to be brilliant fun. It started raining, so I went and sat in the hut at Jack's Pool. And then obviously by the time he came
down, angler's cabin. Oh, hut. It's not a hut.
Sorry, I'm underselling it there. And you can probably tell when it stopped raining, I was itching to get back out because it was almost on a chuck. And then we went back out. I think I had 3 in the afternoon, fishing a similar length of time. They're just switched off. So again, as you get to know a water, you tend to find those best times, and you can take advantage of it. But yeah, that was a really good example of that.
Yeah, it does change. Right, I'm going to just we're just gone over the hour, Julian, so I don't want to keep you too long. I'm just going to run through. Rob Ray is asking, could you use a zigzag setup to fish different layers?
Absolutely, you could. I mean, there's the 2 ways you can do that. If you want it static, you could fish zig style to pop it up off the bottom, or what I was talking about earlier, if you've got a surface float but fish the bait off the bottom, you can explore the depths that way as well. So there's 2 ways you can do it: pop the bait up, or just fish off the bottom with the float. I'll probably have the float because I'm, like I say, I like that visual element. I like watching the float, and that would give you more coverage of the water as well, because the float would naturally move.
And I think it's very important to fish the layers. Carp fishing is particularly, I think, bad where a huge amount of emphasis is put on the trade to push people just to fish the bottom, when there's so many times where you won't get any action on the bottom. You could go to a lake, everybody's fishing on the bottom and nobody's catching. I would suggest that's the time to put zigs out at the very least.
Absolutely.
But right, so Jason's saying shads for the win. Paul, thanks for all the information, Julian Palmer, very useful. Les Bunyan, long time no speak. Les, how you doing? When I pike fish, this is from Anthony, I use a bucket and hang my lures around the rim of the bucket. Yeah, that's an old trick, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Galen is saying, do you ever use hook cutter, essentially high-end small bolt croppers, to cut hooks when lure fishing for pike? It's very common practice in North America to cut a treble hook in order for a very quick, hang on a sec, really stuck in the mouth, really tough bones of the muskies. So
Yeah,
I cutters over here.
Yeah, same here. Well, yeah, I always carry good quality hook cutters like that. That a lot of these bigger lures, they've got bigger hooks on them, so you need decent quality small bolt croppers to go through them. What does a hook cost? Pence. I'd never want to damage a fish just to keep a hook in one piece. Just carefully snip the hook off, get the fish back, replace the hook, and carry on.
Yeah, it's funny. We had some people down here, Ashton's Pools this morning. I mean, he had fish to over 32.13 was the biggest, and I was explaining to them about it's all about fish safety, and I personally advocate cutting the rig instead of trying to get the hook out in the net or. I will always just have a small pair of scissors and I literally just cut the line so I can then take the fish out without having to play around on the rocks. I think things like that, people go, yeah, but I mean, it's got to tie the rig back on, or like I've got to put another treble on. But if it comes down to fish safety, we've got to do all we can, haven't we?
Absolutely, both in my carp fishing and my pike fishing, I always tend to use like the quick change swivels or links at the top of the trace so that I can get everything else out the way and concentrate on the fish and not be trying to drag a rod up the bank, because that's when the fish could get scraped along the floor, or you could stick your rod tip in the ground and break your rod as well. So yeah, absolutely, I tend to go for that approach of getting everything else removed so you can concentrate on fish safety. Definitely.
It'll be interesting this season to see how the stones perform for you in your pike fishing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, really, really big fan of the stones. Really kind of getting into to using them. You know yourself. I look after a small lake that a friend of mine owns, and it was during the time that I started looking after that lake, I started thinking, this isn't a great thing to be doing. It's very weedy, and in that situation, the trade would tell us we need to be dropping our lead on every fish to land it safely. Of course, if you're using 4 or 5 ounce leads, as we often would, fishing on kind of the side of bars and things like that, every time you hook a fish, you're losing that. And there's we all know the science is out there. It's not good for the environment. Obviously, been using the stones, absolutely made up with them. Great, safe alternative, plus genuine advantage, obviously, in using them in terms of the way that you can fish them. With ground bait molded around them, method style. Absolutely brilliant. And equally looking forward to using them more, obviously, in the coming seasons for the predators as well.
Well, the direction of travel with Palatrax will certainly, I know it's a saturated market in many ways, but having the international connections I've got, I'd love to have a small, precise predator range at some stage. So the bigger we can make Palatrax, the more likely these things will happen.
Absolutely.
But Julian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks ever so much.
As always.
Drop our leads in the bin. Well done, Jason.
I love it.
But I think just actually before I go, and please don't think I'm putting you on the spot. I mean, when you first got involved with Palatrax, you very much thought the stones were just a lead-free option, but there's so much more than that. And I think you've got your head around that now, haven't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they are a genuine advantage. You see just the way they sit on the bottom. You're not trying to use something that looks like it shouldn't be there. You're using something that is just natural. It just makes perfect sense. And like I say, with the use of the full system as well, it's a very simple but very effective way of fishing that I'm also starting to take beyond just obviously my carp fishing and things like that, and use for all different species. So yeah, a real advantage.
I think this is the great thing. We've got some very credible anglers now getting involved, and we're kind of bypassing the negatives of the trade and going to real anglers and saying, look, there was never a gimmick, and it's important for people like yourself to be involved, and I thank you for that. But again, thanks for everybody. Everybody's putting up a thank you very much. I'm sure we'll do it again on other species at some stage, Julian. I look forward to seeing you next week. But before I go, the winner is Neil Watson. Neil, if you're still here, congratulations. You have won tonight's prize. So, Neil Watson, well done. But thanks ever so much for so many people being on the feed tonight. And I say, again, thank you very much, Julian, for your time. Appreciate it.
No worries. See you again soon. Thanks for joining, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye. Good night, everybody. Good night.